In 1921, Henry Ford gave an interview to the New York Tribune that almost nobody remembers. He had been standing at Muscle Shoals Dam in Tennessee watching the river move, and he had an idea. Replace gold-backed currency with energy currency. His standard was simple. 1 hour of energy exerted equals 1 unit of currency. More currency could only be created if more energy was actually expended. You could not print a kilowatt hour. You could not decree that something cost energy to produce. The physical work was either done or it was not. Every unit of currency would represent something real, not a government's promise, not a central bank's balance sheet entry, an actual expenditure of physical effort, the supply of money governed by the same laws that govern thermodynamics. You cannot create energy from nothing. You can only convert it. A monetary system built on that constraint would be, for the first time, resistant to manipulation at the level of physics. Ford was a complicated figure whose other views do not survive scrutiny. What he saw at Muscle Shoals does. The insight stands separate from the man. He spent 3 years trying to acquire the dam to prove the concept. He was blocked by a coalition of political and financial interests who had no interest in seeing the existing monetary architecture challenged. He walked away in 1924. The idea went with him. 60 years later, Friedrich Hayek arrived at the same conclusion from a completely different direction. Hayek was not thinking about dams or energy. He was thinking about institutions, specifically about why every monetary system in history had eventually been debased. His diagnosis: governments control the money supply, and governments with the power to expand the money supply will always eventually use it. The incentive is too strong, the constraint too weak. His prescription, published in 1976, was denationalization. Remove the government monopoly on money. Allow competing private currencies. Let markets select the most reliable store of value. He understood this would not happen voluntarily. No government would willingly surrender the printing press. So he framed it differently. The only way to get good money is to take it out of the hands of government entirely, to introduce something that governments simply cannot stop. Ford had the physics right. Hayek had the institutional diagnosis right. Neither had the technology to connect them. Ford and Hayek were circling the same insight without being able to complete it. Ford understood that sound money needs an anchor in physical reality, something that cannot be created from nothing, something whose supply is governed by laws that no committee can override. He reached for energy because energy is the most fundamental constraint in the physical world. You cannot wish it into existence. You cannot legislate more of it. That is not a policy choice. It is physics. Hayek understood that sound money needs structural separation from political control, not a promise of separation, not a central bank with a mandate for independence that can be quietly undermined when the situation demands it. Actual separation, the kind that does not depend on the good intentions of whoever holds power this decade. Ford's energy currency proposal had one problem he could not solve. How do you verify, at scale, that the energy was actually expended? In 1921, there was no mechanism for that. You would have to trust someone's account of how much energy had been produced, which means trusting an institution, which means reintroducing exactly the human discretion that the energy anchor was supposed to remove. He had identified the right property. He did not have the right technology. Hayek identified the right institutional structure. He did not have the right technology either. What would money look like if its production required real-world energy expenditure that no committee could override, verified by a system that no single party controls? Not energy as a metaphor for value, energy as the cost of admission to the ledger itself. A mechanism where the work is either done or it is not, visible to anyone, controlled by no one. That question sat unanswered for decades after both men had made their arguments. The components that might answer it did not yet exist. They do now. This is the Cantillon letter. Monetary truth. Understand it first. Subscribe and visit us at cantillonletter.substack.com.